In the past decade, as ultra-Orthodox Judaism grows and becomes more fervent, a growing group of people have left that world and begun to form a community of their own here in New York. Footsteps has become the cradle of this fledgling community, working on a shoestring budget with an unwavering commitment to social justice. Footsteps provides emotional and practical support to individuals seeking a self-determined life. They respect diverse Jewish identities, and without imposing any beliefs or practices, they work to acknowledge and nurture the people their members are trying to become. The journeys of their members, my journey, my friends' journeys, are not easy. Leaving isolated worlds, we have to overcome unimaginable odds to create new lives for ourselves. Taught as children that there was no meaningful reality beyond ultra-Orthodoxy, my friends and I struggle to redefine our place in the world. Although some of us assimilate completely into the secular world, a growing number of former ultra-Orthodox Jews keep our stories of transition central in our new identities. Some of us have experienced or witnessed deep trauma, and we look around the Jewish landscape and see no accountability for the problems we encountered. We see no acknowledgement, no outrage, no attempt at dealing honestly with very serious issues of sexual and physical abuse, custody discrimination, treatment of women, lack of educational opportunity, and the monopolization of claims to Jewish authenticity. And so, in the past few years, addressing these issues has become a core piece of the post-ultra-Orthodox identity. Our community of former ultra-Orthodox Jews now has a blossoming network of advocates, nonprofits, writers, artists, journalists, and academics who are addressing these challenges. It is a daunting task. We often see ourselves as lone partisans, Davids on the battlefield, facing Goliath-sized problems. We often wonder in conversation amongst ourselves, where are our Jewish brothers and sisters? Apparently, this sense of absence goes both ways. My friends and I are frequently approached by members of the wider Jewish community who are surprised and concerned to learn that very few former ultra-Orthodox Jews belong to conservative or Reform or modern Orthodox or humanist or other Jewish communities. I'll admit, despite abandoning my family's traditions, I'm still handicapped by the judgments of my childhood that found even a Catholic priest less threatening than a female rabbi, and saw even a Christmas tree as less offensive than a modernized synagogue service. These attitudes need a hefty re-examination. But beyond these hindering prejudices, former ultra-Orthodox Jews and the wider Jewish community need to start talking about their relationship. They need to discuss how they see each other, how they view the issues each other's community champions, how they might be allies in common causes and values. I dream of hundreds of conversations at conferences, panels, on blogs, Facebook, and Twitter that begin to explore these issues. I dream of members of every Jewish group, from Reform to Reconstructionist, from Belz to Lubavitch, examining what it means to be a former ultra-Orthodox Jew, how this new community fits into the larger Jewish community, how members of different Jewish groups can work together to champion issues of social justice. Tonight, we take a first step with one small, brave discussion that focuses on one very small piece of this conversation. Tonight, we will explore two closely related questions. One, what is the relationship between former ultra-Orthodox Jews and the wider Jewish community? And two, what are the wider Jewish community's perspectives on major problems in the ultra-Orthodox community, the problems that are defining issues of concern for the formerly ultra-Orthodox? When we talk about ultra-Orthodoxy and the issues of concern to former ultra-Orthodox Jews, we often come across a dichotomy in the media and in people's perspectives. We encounter either a romanticization of ultra-Orthodox life or a vilification of it. We hear about the beauty of the large families, the kindness and generosity of the world from which we come, or we hear about the shocking news headlines and the narrow-mindedness of the ultra-Orthodox. Neither of these simplified perspectives does justice to the complex reality. We would like to have a new conversation tonight, a nuanced conversation that acknowledges the positive qualities of ultra-Orthodoxy while addressing its problems, a conversation that has not happened yet. Let's be frank. There's a reason why conversations that touch on ultra-Orthodoxy are often so black and white. It's much easier to infantilize our ultra-Orthodox brothers and sisters, to reduce them to pure beauty or pure dysfunction, than to take on the complexities of reality. Of course, the urge to extreme caricature is exacerbated by the ultra-Orthodox community loudly proclaimed sensitivity to criticism that has frightened many more measured conversations into silence. We hope to move beyond these instincts. We believe we pay the most respect to the ultra-Orthodox community when we treat them as a serious group, worthy of thoughtful examination, capable of tolerating a conversation about our reactions to their choices. It is our hope that we have a groundbreaking and provocative discussion here tonight that results in stronger connections between former ultra-Orthodox Jews and the wider Jewish community, one that challenges the status quo, one that builds alliances that boldly stand for justice and the most lofty values of our common heritage. And now I turn the conversation to Sam.
When I attended Satmar Yeshiva, an integral part of my education was that ultra-Orthodox Judaism is the most authentic form of Judaism, that all other Jewish denominations and identities are at best diluted forms of Judaism. And while many of us who like me, have left ultra-Orthodox Judaism, have rejected the ultra-Orthodox Jewish community's view on secularism and modernity, many of us still struggle with the idea that the wider Jewish community represents an authentic Jewish tradition. I want to start this conversation by asking our panelists, does ultra-Orthodoxy have a monopoly on claims to Jewish authenticity? Rabbi Yain, why don't you start us off?
Well, I think by the virtue of the fact that I'm sitting here, no. Ultra-Orthodoxy does not have the claim on authenticity. I very much believe that an authentic Jewish community is one with a multitude of voices, a multitude of backgrounds. We don't need to look farther than the Talmud to understand that, or even before the Talmud, that we don't need to look farther than the Second Temple period, where there were multiple communities all trying to actually vie for the authentic Jewish voice. And unfortunately, we know what happens when communities vie for the authentic Jewish voice, the temple gets destroyed. So the question is, how do we understand that we each have something to offer, that maybe our perspective is different, but we're all after the same thing, which is how Jewish wisdom and how Jewish tradition can make us better people.
Thank you. Rabbi Ingber?
I couldn't agree more with Rabbi Ain. If you look up the word authenticity, one of the definitions, a number of them appear. There's conforming to a fact or based on fact, conforming to an original or made or done the same way as an original. And then there's one definition I loved. When I looked up authenticity, it's not false. Not false. So an authentic Jewish response, or what is authentic Judaism, is a Judaism that isn't false. And to some degree, no one can claim to have an expression of authentic Judaism if in some way, shape, or form they are they're holding false notions to some degree. And that's part of what we're having a conversation about tonight. And I certainly think that authentic Judaism isn't owned by anyone, right? And to some degree, those who claim authentic Judaism scares me a little bit when I hear someone saying that they have the authentic thing. It's a little bit scary.
I'd like to respond to the question from within the perspective of the Orthodox community. Even from that perspective, I'll share with you something that I share with my students in a class on modern Orthodoxy that I give to all first-year students, which is very often they will confront those to their right who will challenge them and say, how do you defend being modern Orthodox? What allows you to be modern, to be engaged in the secular world, shouldn't you be devoting all of your time to Torah study? And then you start trying to answer, well, I can rely on Maimonides, he had an open approach, and you start looking for answers to the question. And I tell my students that as soon as you start answering the question, you've already lost. Because the question assumes that, which we have all to some degree implicitly bought into, that the Haredi approach is the authentic one, and we have to justify ourselves why we're not Haredi. And actually, the response should be, how do you justify being Haredi? And really, that is the only, honest, I think, legitimate response to that type of a question. Maybe everybody has to justify why they've made their choices, but certainly no one denomination or division or movement needs to justify it more than any other one. And historically speaking, clearly, Haredi Judaism is a response to modernity, the same way modern Orthodoxy is, the same way Reform is, the same way conservative is, the same way secularism is. All of these are various responses to modernity, and pre the advent of the Haskalah, there was no Haredi Judaism. And I think that if we can help bring that historical awareness into the conversation, it will make us all much more embracing of the diversity of the movements.
I want to add and say the beauty of this is that while no one approach is the most authentic, what all of us do is an authentic expression of how we believe Judaism can be practiced. I know that when I was born in the conservative movement, was born, raised, and remained in the conservative movement, and my way of practicing my belief system is authentic to my understanding of how I want to be Jewish. So I don't think we should say that authenticity is totally bad, because authenticity is, when people say you're an authentic person, that's a compliment. You want to be seen as authentic. So I'm authentically a conservative Jew and am proud of that, but that doesn't dilute somebody else being an authentic Orthodox Jew.
Yeah, I mean, confusing authenticity with legitimacy is really the question.
Yeah.
The assumption is that most people, whenever someone says this is not an authentic expression of Judaism or Yiddishkeit, it's not even implicit. I mean, to some degree, you would say, do you mean to say that what I'm practicing is illegitimate? And that's usually more of, I think, the deeper subtext of that claim. And if authenticity means exactly as, there's a famous Hasidic story from, I think it was the Lulavar Rebbe, that when he passed away, his son took over, and he changed everything. So all of the students were afraid to go tell the new Rebbe, your father did it differently. So they named one guy to go and tell him and said, Rebbe, your father did everything differently than you. He said, no, my father did exactly the way I do it. He did it his way, and I do it my way.
Yeah, I think many footsteppers will use that line at some point. There. But the reason I thank you for those responses, and I very enjoyed this conversation. I really got to the core of this conversation, because the question of authentic Judaism isn't just, sometimes for many of us who have left ultra-Orthodoxy, isn't just a question that is theoretical or is about identity, as important as that is, but sometimes has some very critical and very real-life implications. And I want to share with you an example of that. I have a friend named Hannah, who is a Footsteps member as well. And Hannah's husband divorced her when she decided that although she was proudly Jewish, but she decided to stop shaving her head, she enrolled in college and wore pants, all things frowned upon in that community. Yes. It's good we get those listed. And the ultra-Orthodox community organized to support her ex's claims to custody. And they financed a top lawyer. They got rabbis to testify that by having one parent change their lifestyle to a more modernized version of Judaism will be very confusing and very disorienting for the children. And for many other cases that many of my friends in Footsteps and those who have left ultra-Orthodoxy have seen, that claim that the change in a more modern and a more or any different kind of Judaism that isn't Haredi will be disorienting to the children has given the judges the kind of reason to award custody to the ultra-Orthodox parent. So I want to ask you, what kind of role, if any, does the wider Jewish community have to play in assuring that Jewish parents don't lose their children because they decide to explore a different Jewish community than the one they were raised in? Rabbi Ingber, would you like?
For me, as a formerly Haredi Jew and also as a liberal progressive rabbi, I think it's really vital for me to make a claim for ethics and for advocacy, that I want to be both in my person and also in my rabbinate at the shul, the Romamu, a place where we're not just saying we're safe, but actually we're speaking truths. We're saying the things that need to be said. So I think that within that, as a background, I think that it's vital for us to speak up on behalf and to be an advocate for the importance of other versions of Judaism that are authentic and that actually have legal implications and legal ramifications. We have to be willing to say that derech eretz kadma laTorah, that family values and that a relationship between a child and his or her parent is of the utmost importance, and to some degree that the damage done by not being with your mother and father is much greater than damage wearing pants or being in a liberal institution. And we have to be willing to say those things strongly and vociferously, Because without it, I think it's really, lo samar al dam re'echa. There's a responsibility that we have in the liberal Jewish community to be willing to take a stand and to be vocal about it.
How do we bring to the larger public awareness the idea that there are multiple authentic versions of what a Jewish life is? I have to just share that from my perspective, as a modern Orthodox Jew, I find this particularly challenging because I think that the starkest images in the press are those of people who look very different from you and me. In the way that they dress, that their attitudes, their worldviews are very different. And it's easy for people to focus on this, and this is Orthodox Judaism. And I'm shocked sometimes, or sadly no longer shocked, about how many people don't believe that I'm Orthodox. Their only understanding of Orthodox Judaism is Haredi Judaism, secular Jews, non-Jews. And I think just for all of us sitting here, it's a question about how to get the attention of the press, how to work to shape public perception. And in a way, it goes back to your question of authenticity. Because I think some of what for some people means, oh, this is authentic, is this is very different, this is exotic, this must be what it means to really be somehow authentically Jewish, because everybody else just looks like you and me, so that can't be something that's special or different. So to be Jewish in a real way is to be somehow different in a way that clearly labels you as such. So I think that gets to the authenticity issue, and it's an ongoing challenge which I wish I knew the answer with, about how to help make the press and help shape the public perception around these issues.
I think we need to be honest with ourselves, or in I language, I'll be honest with myself, in that if a man or woman was coming to me and wanted to help to leave their spouse and raise their children in this new community, mine or others, I would want to help them, because I actually believe there's tremendous value to that, as much value as the Haredi rabbi feels in keeping them in their community. And I think we need to own that I do think that if I see a girl who's not getting educated and she's 15 years old, I want her in my community because I want to expose her to something different. And that's a value statement. I recognize that. So there is a reason for the Haredi community to be fearful of us, because we do believe that there is something to be gained by being a part of our community. It doesn't need to be one or the other if people are fine in the community they're in. But if they're not fine, then I don't know how you answer it legally. But emotionally, as I'm hearing the question, I would want to find a way to make a difference.
But Rabbi Ingber,
Go ahead, Sam.
Because I think my question, of course, the legal portions of this question is very complicated, but I think what this gets to, since these judges, as far as I know, aren't Jewish, or maybe, but aren't particularly involved, and because I think not only within the wider Jewish community there's this kind of tension of who is authentic and who isn't, but I think, as Rabbi Linzer hinted at, even the outside world, the non-Jewish world, the people that aren't involved, seem to have this idea that ultra-Orthodoxy is Jewishness, and everything else is just diluted. And I think that these rulings, or can at least in part be attributed to the fact that the judge sees a change from ultra-Orthodoxy as a change to not Jewish. And if were capable, maybe, of diversifying the idea and expanding the idea of the diversity of Jewish identity, judges who see that won't be able to be set up this kind of picture of this parent suddenly isn't Jewish anymore. And that's why I think it isn't a legal question.
Yeah, this past weekend at our shul, Rabbi Joseph Tolushkin was teaching at a Lunch and Learn, and Rabbi Tolushkin said something really powerful. He said that, he didn't say how long it has been, but he said it's something to lament, is that in the last number of years, maybe, who knows, he said even a century possibly, that we in the American landscape, and possibly the world at this point, have confused religion with ethics, or we have divorced religion from that, right. Is what he said. And that when you can speak about someone and say they're religious but they're not ethical, or they're religious and they were a thief, or they're religious X, Y, and Z, and we can finish those sentences, there's a deep problem. And it reminds me a little bit of this conversation, because to some degree the frames of the Orthodox world, or the ultra-Orthodox world, I think need to be challenged. Right? It's traumatic to change from being ultra-Orthodox to, let's say, to a different denominational, different religious posture. But it's more traumatic, and we have to argue that as well, and we need to change the frame. It's even more traumatic for a child to be divorced or to be taken away from their parent. And we have to affirm over and over again that we don't agree with that posture over and over again. And we need to be strong in that affirmation. We have a woman in our community who was married when she was 17 and divorced and came out as a lesbian when she was 30. And her kids actually are the beneficiaries because of the shared custody, because of the husband isn't ethical. He's religious but not ethical. And whatever that means. And I have seen these children move through the stage of being shocked by their mother's life choice, but they are so much stronger because of what they've been exposed to. And we can prove that. We can prove the ego strength that they've gained from being exposed to other lifestyles and to other ways of approaching the world, their pluralistic mindset, their capacity to see difference as beautiful and not dangerous. All of those things have been heightened in these children. And we, in the liberal progressive community, we need to be advocates for that. We need to be strongly in the trenches and fighting for that shift in perception away from the religious frame to the deeper psychological frame. And we need to bring all of the resources we have to bear and say, it's much more traumatic for you not to be with your mother or be with your father than it is for you to go from being an ultra-Orthodox to being a renewal or a humanistic Jew, whatever that might be.
Yeah, and I wonder, would you say, is that just a call because of the kind of communal responsibility to family, or is there something in here that involves the misuse of Judaism that I think makes it a Jewish issue, not just a familial issue? Would Rabbi Linzer,
I could respond. To
Sure.
pick up on the point that Rabbi Ingber was mentioning, the difference between how we think about ethical behavior and religious behavior. And ethical, in a way, can be understood to be make much greater demands on us because it's universal truth, whereas religious ritual activity is more particularistic and therefore in some way less universally binding. And nevertheless, because it is universal, it lacks that sense of distinctiveness and it lacks that Jewishness. It can be seen by the fact that we make blessings before we take a lulav, but we don't make a blessing before we give charity. We, in a way, signal this is a ritual activity and this is not, but also somehow we signal to ourselves this is a Jewish activity and this is not necessarily. And in a way, this goes back to, the critique of the prophets. Isaiah, Jeremiah, their whole critique of the people is that you're running and bringing these sacrifices in the temple because you think this will secure your favor with God, and you're ignoring your more fundamental moral, ethical responsibilities, feeding the poor, clothing the naked, and they were saying you are not being genuinely religious, genuinely Jewish. By prioritizing these rituals or by thinking that the rituals excuses or allows you to forego your ethical obligations. And I think that that's part of the conversation that we have to bring into the public sphere, is not that Haredism is the perception, it's more authentic because it's more religious, because of the greater degree of rituals or difference, but in a way be willing to say that it's not as religious in certain ways because of some of its ethical problems. And in a way, they're not living up to some of their Jewish and halachic and Torah responsibilities. We have to be willing to adopt the mantle of the early prophets.
Rabbi Ingber, you wanted to say something?
No, I was just going to say amen to that. I was going to say that.
Times two.
I just think, amen.
I think we kind of wanted a crowd, amen. But yeah. Anyway, and I think the question of how these ideas and how we actually get them out, as Rabbi Linzer and all of you hinted at, we'll hopefully get to later and more practical. But I want to shift to the question of that general conversation, the conversation between ultra-Orthodoxy and the wider Jewish community. Thanks, Rabbi Ingber. For many of us who are left ultra-Orthodoxy, we're often very surprised when we meet people of the wider Jewish community and we realize the kind of romanticized view they have of ultra-Orthodoxy and how that kind of romanticized view informs how they interact and how they basically see that community. And when it isn't romanticized, it's often just vilified and dismissed as this kind of community we don't interact with. And I was wondering if we can all just discuss what is the source of that romanticization or vilification, which we see in the wider Jewish community when they relate to ultra-Orthodoxy, and how does it affect the conversation between your community and ultra-Orthodox community on things you may disagree on, Rabbi Ain?
So I'll start with the vilification.
Okay.
Well, because in some ways, when Leah and Lonnie called me to ask me to be on this panel, I was very upfront with them. And I said, what I said earlier, that I come from a certain community. I am very proud of that community, and what I see in the news, what I read, what I hear about, I am not proud that the ultra-Orthodox call themselves Jews, if you will, or using the tenor of Judaism and then aren't ethical. I find that extremely problematic. I know we're focusing on the United States, but I have a logical and emotional, a political concern with what goes on in Israel and how the ultra-Orthodox community is often has the monopoly on Jewish life. And so as a member of the non-ultra-Orthodox Jewish community, I have emotionally vilified it. Not if I meet somebody individual, but as a community, it's hard because all you hear and all you see and all you read, and then how you might be treated. I mean, members of my synagogue have heard this. You know, I remember in '93 spending 9 days in Poland, and then coming to Israel with my group 20 years ago this summer to daven shacharit at the Kotel. And I grew up wearing a talit. That was my authentic Judaism. That's what I always did. And we were spit at and yelled at. And I thought, how can I be more Jewish in Poland than in Jerusalem? And so I was 16, and that had an impact on this question of vilification. Now, again, that is a caricature of what's really going on, but it enters into your question. Now, so the flip side of the authenticity, and this also goes to Poland, and we talked about this on the call when we were prepping for tonight. I think there is a tremendous sense of guilt in the liberal Jewish community about the Holocaust. And when people look at the ultra-Orthodox community and the men with the beards and the payas, they say, well, they are the remnants of what was lost. And if they are able to survive, we are able to survive on their behalf because of all the kids they're having. And so however they live their lives because look how many of our people who used to look like that were killed, were murdered. And I think there's a sense of guilt that we're not living up to what the old world looked like.
And you think that's the source of that kind
of romanticization.
And
I think it's a piece
have you
of
found that hinders the conversation?
I think it does. I mean, I've had conversations in different congregations that I've worked in. So even my own members who are, card-carrying members of the conservative movement, when they speak about ultra-Orthodoxy, they don't want to speak about it negatively because there's a sense of guilt, and how dare we criticize, as opposed to a sense of pride of we can own what we're doing, and that's okay, even if it's distinct from what we see.
Yeah, I think Rabbi Linzer, what do you?
So maybe I'll start by picking up on the theme of guilt, because that would be my guess of where a lot of this is coming from as well. On the one hand, for those that feel that they are not living as observant of a life or as Jewish of a life as they think they should ideally live, that could lead to one of two responses. It could lead to vilification. So you make yourself feel better because, the people that are acting in this more Jewish way, look at all the evils that are associated with it, so I don't have to feel bad about what I'm not doing. Right. I think it could also lead to romanticization. It could lead to a sense of like a vicarious fulfillment of my Judaism. They'll be the ones that will be observant for me. They'll be the ones that will be really religious symbolically for me. And isn't it so beautiful? And by holding that up as an ideal, I also somewhat mollify maybe some misgivings I have about the way I'm living my life Jewishly or not so Jewishly. I do also think that that there's a question here about being able to be engaged in respectful dialogue. I mean, we're saying we're having a conversation, but look around you, right? Who's missing from this conversation?
We invited them.
What?
We invited them.
I am sure that you did, and that was not meant as a critique. I think that often I feel that they don't want to hear anything I have to say. And they are, very prepared to be critical of me and of sort of a wide range of people that are not like them. And it's very hard to have that not impact your emotional relationship with them, feeling sort of hated or criticized and not listened to. And I think that also can lead to, a further distancing and a vilification. How do you work to create positive relationships if it's a two-way street? So I think that that's an area of challenge.
And
as
have
well.
you found that have there been conversations that have been hindered by that specifically? Or?
Well, conversations with Haredim?
Well, no, people. Specifically, what I'm interested in is not so
Right.
much how Haredim see themselves as more
Right.
authentic, but how this affects how the wider Jewish community sees the Haredi world.
I totally think so. I think that a romanticization often gets in the way of, not that there's a need to critique for its own sake, but gets in the way of talking about what, my vision for what an authentic or what I would believe a more ideal way of a Jewish life would be. And if this is being romanticized, then that can get in the way. If this is being held up as the only authentic. And if it's being vilified, then we can't be self-critical. And I often push my students to allow themselves to be self-critical of where do we fall short in terms of our devotion to using all of our time in, thinking about what it is God wants from us and pursuing with the same degree of passion our Torah studies or our growth as Jews and as and our religious studies. So now, sometimes it's hard to get the good without the bad because some of that comes from a single-mindedness and from shutting things out in the larger world. But I think the vilification, besides just being bad in itself because of sinat chinam, because of purposeless hatred, I think vilification gets in the way of being able to be self-critical. It's a way of not being self-critical because you vilify the other.
Rabbi Ingber?
Well, there's really not much to add. I think that both Rabbi Ain and Rabbi Lizer covered most of it. I just would say this, that in my own personal experience, having, I definitely say I'm a recovering Haredi. If people ask me, and I often say that I suffer from a heavy dose of post-traumatic God disorder, and I think that the vilification, just frankly, vilification actually cuts me off from many of the resources that are available in the Haredi world. There's a lot of beauty there, and there's a lot of banality. There's a lot of grandeur, and there's a lot of mishigas. There's a lot of things there that are shadow, and things that are ugly, and things that are quite sublime. And so my experience, for example, as a liberal progressive Jew, whatever it is, a recovering Haredi, whatever my identity is, when people say, are you Orthodox? I say, no, I'm Paradox. That's my, my current one. So I often, for example, my wife and I decided we love Yiddish. My brother is a Yiddish speaker. My family's Yiddish speaking. So I wanted to name my son, give me a Yiddish name. He felt when my first son, so we named him Bear Leib. So of course you can't imagine my in-laws are card-carrying Reconstructionists, card-carrying Reconstructionists. And so that was the first strike. Okay, that was the first one. The second strike was that we wanted him to have an upsharing. Oh, forget about it. An upsharing is when you don't cut your son's, usually a boy's hair, until he's 3 years old. And so you can imagine trying to explain the beauty that I see in so many elements of the Haredi culture that are so beautiful. And how is it possible to hold the beauty with also the ugly, the banality, the things that are actually that are criminal or abusive or dysfunctional, and be able to name them equally? And that's when we think about beyond romanticizing and vilifying, that it's the beyond that's interesting, is that being able to hold the space for both of those, right, without extremely embracing either one, and being able to be critical about our knee-jerk reactions, as Rabbi Linzer said, that actually tend to be sinat chinam or hatred for no reason, where we're actually just playing out our own issues, our own stuff around Haredism without actually naming the thing itself that bothers us. It's kind of a blanket statement, anything that in some way smacks of that religiosity. If you're wearing tzitziot, if you're wearing fringes, whatever it is, that becomes a way of saying, oh, the next thing you know, you won't be eating in my house, and that kind of thing. And we have to be very self-critical, as Rabbi Linzer said, around the issues of vilification, but also on the levels of romanticizing that, within my community, often people will be overly romantic, and it has something to do with the foreign, exotic nature of having never actually spoken to someone. They've seen them from the outside, and they actually know what goes on, and it becomes an extreme caricature of that life. And really, once one begins to speak with them, they realize that there's very little in common between your fantasy of that life and the real life that it is.
Thank you. And I think that very much reaches about what stands at the crux of the conversation, of the dialogue between this community and the ultra-Orthodox community, and because I think an important barrier, and as many of us find, isn't just talking to ultra-Orthodox, as Rabbi Linzer mentioned, who wouldn't come to this event, but also between the wider Jewish community. There's a certain kind of defensive-ness of critiquing, because as Rabbi you mentioned, this kind of guilt. And I think we can see this very clearly in a specific example. Many of you know, and have you seen in the news about the tradition of Metzitza B'Peh, which is basically a tradition practiced by many ultra-Orthodox Jews, which involves that after the mohel, the person performing the circumcision, after being done with the procedure, uses his own mouth to remove the blood from the boy's penis. And there have been many health officials have confirmed that many babies have fallen ill by the herpes that has been transferred from the mohel to the newborn. And there have been some cases where they've been died that have been confirmed here in New York City. And ultra-Orthodox Jews have used political and religious clout to resist efforts to regulate that practice. Even the watered-down, currently enforced law by Mayor Bloomberg, which requires that parents who have a newborn boy be informed of the dangers of that community. And the ultra-Orthodox community has essentially said that goes against their religious freedom. Yeah, they have to basically sign away that they're okay with the procedure, given the data that we have, and given what health officials have confirmed, and those who have, and activists who have tried to make people aware about the procedure and protecting these children, have basically said that the safety of children is an article of Jewish faith, and we should stand by that. And I was wondering, is it appropriate for the wider Jewish community to become more involved with the issue politically or in the media? And if yes, what should their stands be, and how should they go about advocating for it? Rabbi Ingber, would you start now? Oh, okay. Did I mess up? Okay.
I'm keeping tabs.
Okay.
I don't keep score.
Yeah.
Well, first, just to clarify, I do want to say that the herpes issue is not necessarily talking about a sexually transmitted disease. There's types of herpes that are not that.
Correct.
So
it's
we
not herpes simplex virus.
assume that
Okay.
that's what's going on. But on the other hand, that does make it a more pervasive problem, because really a lot of cold sores of the mouth are the source of this problem. In terms of what our response should be, I think first of all, in terms of this, to make a step in the non-vilification, I think it's important to appreciate some of the background of where the response is coming from. On the one hand, the response is coming from what I see as a deeply problematic aspect of Haredi culture, which is giving equal weight to everything, from whether it's a biblical or rabbinic to a custom. Everything is, to use a phrase, Yeharig val Yavor. Everything is, you should rather die rather than not to do any practice, any traditional. I'm sorry, changing your shoelace. Any traditional practice. But not just in the context of when it's being, the government is trying to put it down. I didn't mean it in the technical halachic sense, but I meant in a general way in which religious life is lived. Everything is of equal and absolute weight. But beyond that, in the particular context of a government trying to interfere with religious practice, we have experienced as a people governments, and it's going on right now, that have tried to and have outlawed shechita, ritual slaughter, because of concerns of suffering of animals and other types of interference. And it evokes a defensiveness, which is we have to circle the wagons. Anything the government is trying to do, we have to keep them out of our religion, because once they start interfering with our religion, who knows where it will go. Now, part of the problem is not appreciating the changed circumstances. We're not living in Tsarist Russia anymore. But I do think it is important to at least have a certain sympathy to where some of that response might be coming from. That being said, I think that it definitely is our responsibility as a community to speak up, both to protect the health and the interests of these infant boys, but also to protect what I believe is Judaism, and it goes to the issue about how the perception of Judaism in the public sphere is shaped by what happens in the Haredi community. And that's the authentic Judaism. And everybody else, they're not doing more of, those that say don't do it, they're doing some watered down version. But authentic Judaism demands that actually this is what happens. So I think that it is absolutely our responsibility in whatever the fora are, whether it is trying to directly engage the Haredi community, whether it is probably that won't be successful, but try to find the right soapbox or soapboxes to be very clear about the responsibility we have towards protecting life and how that is an overriding mandate within Judaism, and how that this type of a ritual is absolutely not required and does not represent what Judaism, what Torah, what halacha asks of us.
I've seen it a bit in the conservative community, and I imagine other liberal communities. There are congregants who question whether there should even be a bris at all, and if the bris should just be done by a doctor in a hospital, and so on and so forth. And for me, a bris on the 8th day is very much a line in the sand. Why is it more of a line in the sand than something else? I don't have a good answer for you. I just know that it is.
And do you think that the resistance to heaven oil is because of
I think it's one of the reasons.
I just want to highlight Rabbi Linzer's point that it's for the sake of Torah, for the sake of Judaism, right, that it's to some degree appropriated inappropriately by the Haredi voice, that we should be doing it for the sake of a Judaism that is more humane, more tolerant, and consistent, authentic.
Yeah, no. But I think, Rabbi, what you touched on is how we can maybe have bris be defined on our own terms, not as how it is. But my question would also, and I think you've all touched on that, about saying what Jewish stance is about how these procedures and health. But my question would also be, can we not only just change what bris means as far for the outer world, but can we also affect maybe political action, it goes back to the same custody question, that for not only for the wider Jewish community, but the world at large, humanity at large, might have that kind of mistaken idea about Judaism, and can we inform them about that more so that other politicians can realize that doing that doesn't go against bris, or at least it's not the only idea about Jewish identity?
I don't think that that's what's happening. We definitely can try to make a very different view heard in the larger public sphere, but I think that what's happening is catering to the Haredi vote, which has a very serious vote in particular segments of the community. And I think that part of the issue is that they tend to vote more based on their Judaism than the rest of the Jewish community. So they will all vote for the politician that wants to get rid of the Metzitza B'Peh law. None of us are going to vote against the politician because he's favoring that, because of his position about Metzitza B'Peh. So it's really a political question, and to some degree, maybe it's a question about how much we bring our Judaism into our political activity, which could be argued that maybe we should be doing that a lot more than we are.
I think that what we're expressing, I think what people might be hearing here is there's a bit of a futility that's coming across to some degree. I think that each of us here believes, and I'm sure many of you agree, that it would be great to be able to mount some kind of public relations campaign, or be able to get some word in edgewise. It would be great to be able to say things in a clear and intellectually stimulating and compelling way, and bring, and have the media draw some attention to a different version of Judaism. All of these things would be wonderful, but again, there is a kind of attrition and a futility that it's very difficult to mount any momentum in the public sphere, and that's an interesting thing to look at. I certainly, think that it's very important to be engaging the ultra-Orthodox community in some way, right? Whether it's through an op-ed piece or even showing up. I mean, I know that of rabbis who've shown up to protest at various Haredi events where there have been groups of advocates for those children who have been abused in the Haredi community. And I wonder where the rabbis, right? Where the rabbis who should be right now pounding the pavement. It's not Israel, it's not Palestine, but it's an issue that should draw, at least as much attention as that. I mean, children who are being abused and have no voice, and where is the outrage? Where's the outcry? So that's a separate issue, whether or not we should be actually taking to the streets and doing things in a more public way. And I also asked myself, I was at Chovevei Torah, I was a student of Rabbi Linzer's, and I was at that yeshiva. It's an Orthodox yeshiva, and I actually am been very well behaved tonight, to some degree.
We appreciate it.
I've been known to say things and get myself in trouble. That's why I made notes here, just to keep myself from saying anything that would be misconstrued as Haredi bashing. But I often find that it's important, and I won't do this, Lonnie, don't worry, I'm not doing this tonight, but I often find that saying inflammatory things, actually sensationalizing things to some degree, and I agree with Rabbi Dov, with Rabbi Linzer, that it's very nuanced and want us to pick and choose, but to some degree, the playing field is not level, because we, for the most part, value pluralism. We, for the most part, value playing by the rules. We, for the most part, all of us are at some developmental stage where plurality of voices and diversity is actually one of the values that we hold up. And we're actually in a conversation with, for the most part, a value structure that doesn't see those things as the ultimate value. They would have our voices removed from the conversation, and we are, in some way, playing a very polite game with people who are not playing politely. And so it actually, in the end, the question is raised around whether or not it is possible for the liberal progressive Jewish world to find the appropriate means toward the ends that we seek. That's the first thing I wanted to say. The second thing I wanted to say was, if we shift gears now away from the conversation between communities and then focus on the conversation between each and every one of us with those who have dropped out of those communities, those who are who Footsteps serves and who Footsteps is engaging and trying to support, and that problem and how severe and serious that problem is. I know I get to see it firsthand. First of all, because I am a recovering Haredi, I would often go to Cholent or other what are called XO, or places where formerly Orthodox or ultra-Orthodox Jews gather, and I myself very firmly entrenched in those communities when I began Romamu, my synagogue. And because of that, to some degree, or because of other things that I don't know, Romamu has been a place where many formerly ultra-Orthodox Jews come and feel welcomed. And one of the things that's happening there is that there's no judgment. In fact, when I tried to judge, meaning there was a point in the first 2 years of Romamu when people were coming and not wearing yarmulkes. And we call this now the yarmulke debacle, because what happened was that I tried to legislate that there would be yarmulkes in the shul. And a group of formerly ultra-Orthodox Jews came over to me and said, David, what are you doing? I said, you're in a shul. We have
Can we keep that as a teaser for the story?
Okay,
because I do want to get to that question about your community and the ultra-Orthodox community. So we don't know how the yarmulke debacle ended. Okay. So
even better, thank you.
Yeah. So I would like to now shift the discussion from the wider Jewish community to the response to ultra-Orthodoxy to those who actually left. And I'd like to ask you to imagine you walk into a lobby downtown and you're waiting for the elevator and you hear a person walking in asking the doorman which floor Footsteps is on. And while you're waiting for the elevator, which is always stuck on the 10th floor, that person tells you that they grew up ultra-Orthodox and they left that community. As that person says that, the elevator arrives and you both step in. In the time that you guys are going to share in the elevator, what will you tell that person about why they should explore your community?
So let's say I walk in and I'm wearing my kippah like I do all the time, and they sort of look at me, and I'm going to what Leah said before, that in some ways am I more threatening than the Pope, which I appreciate. That I would say, so let me tell you about what it means to me to be a conservative Jew. It means being very steeped in Jewish ritual in a way that it helps guide and celebrate the good and the bad of Jewish life, of lives, Jewish or otherwise, death, birth, how we eat, how we dress, how we parent, how we die, and that being a Jew, being a conservative Jew, helps us think about that. And being a conservative Jew for me means being a part of a chain of tradition that goes back not only 100 years, but minimally 2,000 years, 4,000 years, and that I see myself as part of this authentic Jewish expression, that I believe deeply in Jewish life, Jewish time, a sense of egalitarianism, that I, as a woman, have every opportunity that my male colleagues, rabbis or not, have to be active Jewish members, active members of a Jewish community ritually, And that as Jews, as conservative Jews, when I understand what revelation is and what I understand Torah is, I don't think I have the final answer of what God's will is. I am not so arrogant to say that I know what God's will is. But as a conservative Jew, what I'm trying to do is peel back the layers of an onion to understand how have all these voices contributed to understanding what God demands of us so that we can ethically behave in the world, so that we can go to bed each night saying that we've made the world a little bit better than when it was when we woke up.
Thank you. Rabbi Ingber, do you want to give us the end of that story? If it ties into your elevator pitch.
I mean, listen, I say this all the time. It's not an elevator pitch. People come every week to my synagogue, and the first thing you say is, "Was machst, Yid, how are you?" And I say, I don't have answers. And this isn't a place to come for answers, a place to come with your questions and to come with your anger and your frustration and your wounds. And all of us are here, atheists, agnostics, formerly Orthodox, still Orthodox. We have people who are still Orthodox who come to Ramu. We have people who are from every denomination. I mean, Yitzhak Greenberg once famously said, "It doesn't matter what denomination you're from as long as you're ashamed of it." That's So we have the full spectrum of those who are ashamed of their denominational affiliation, and I say they come to this community because it's a community of yearning. It's a community of seekers, and we don't have any creed. You don't have to recite your Ani Mamins or your Halavai Ani Mamins, that I wish that I believed or believes. There's no creed. We're coming together with all of the baby that the ultra-Orthodox world has and all the resources that are within our tradition. And a lot of the bathwater isn't there, and I can promise them that. And I can also promise them that they don't have to wear their yarmulkes, because that's actually what happened. As I said, do you think that the people who are coming into the shul, this group that came to me, do you think they don't know, with that big bowl of yarmulkes that's in the front, and looking around at the majority of the men who are here, that yarmulkes are more than a suggestion? He said, don't you think it's a considered choice that they're not wearing the yarmulkes? He said, you have no idea, David, how much freedom you have given them for them to come to your synagogue, to sit in the synagogue, and to not be judged, and not be told what they have to do, if they have to stand, if they have to sit. They come in because there is, as Leah was saying earlier, there is a resonance, there is a residue of something beautiful that is still alive inside of them, and they want to participate in it, but they want to do it with their ambivalence and their ambiguity. And can you create a space that is ambivalent friendly? Right?
Conservative Judaism.
Right? Well, no. To some degree not. It's not. It's halavai. Halavai. Right? Everybody wants to say that they're ambivalent now. Yeah, I was ambivalent. No, I'm ambivalent. No.
It took this panel for you to realize that?
No, I'm more ambivalent. Look who thinks they're ambivalent. Exactly. Look who thinks they're ambivalent.
First, I would say that, and I mean this sincerely, I would not start by trying to pitch modern Orthodoxy or open Orthodoxy or my particular commitment and observance. I know that this is something that Footsteps is very committed to, but I believe it in the depths of my soul, which is I would speak to this person and say, I would be happy to help to be in a conversation with you to help you find how you can best embrace your Judaism in a way that is true to you and who you are and the path that you want to be on. And I genuinely believe that, and that is really the only right answer. If the person says, yes, but I'm exploring, so tell me about your path and tell me about what there is in your commitment and observance and way of life that might be of interest to me. I would say that from where this person is coming from, what modern Orthodoxy or open Orthodoxy can offer is a similar type of a commitment to serious engagement with Torah study and a community that has that serious engagement in Torah study, a community that has a serious commitment to halacha and in all of its details, and that the engagement in Torah study and in halacha, that when one has that, it's sort of the current that there's this sort of intimate connection between the Torah study and the areas of observance, and at the same time, that there's a real openness, an openness to be self-critical, an openness to doubt, an openness to question, an openness to explore the larger world, secular studies, and that in a way maybe that this is, had they been brought up this way, they wouldn't have, I felt a need possibly to break away. But I do think, and this gets to the almost extremism of that sometimes, you know, of the community, the black and white, the either or, that if you break away, there's no middle ground, and that maybe I think is how many might feel. So that's what I would say that might be attractive to them, a way to continue to be engaged in the things that probably were very meaningful to you, Torah, halakha, within a community that's committed to that, the types of prayer that you're familiar with, and at the same time to have a real openness to thought and the culture and the larger society, and to be able to be self-critical and questioning and not feel that that somehow makes you invalid.
Thank you very much. Obviously, as you can see, these topics are only a sampling of the issues we can touch on the conversation between those who have left ultra-Orthodoxy and the wider Jewish community. I truly want to thank you all for participating, and all of you for.
Thank you.
Yes. And I just, you know, a conversation that's nuanced and productive, and just goes beyond romanticization and vilification. You know, I believe that many of us, those who have left ultra-Orthodoxy, have been yearning for that conversation, and many in the wider Jewish community have been interested in that community. And I really believe, you know, tonight this conversation has begun. So thank you.
We would be pleased to send a complimentary DVD of this program to anyone who wishes to support Shalom TV with a tax-deductible gift of $36, double high or more, to the nonprofit organization Jewish Education in Media. Simply visit the Shalom TV website homepage and click on the Donate button to make a donation by PayPal or your credit card. And please indicate the program for which you would like a DVD. Or you can send your tax-deductible check made out to GEM, Post Office Box 180, Riverdale Station, Bronx, New York, 10471. And again, please remember to indicate which program you would like to receive on DVD with our compliments. And we thank you for your kind support.